and welcome back to MFA Writers. Before we get to today's episode, I just want to thank you all for listening to and supporting us in any way you can. Whether that's rating and reviewing the podcast, sharing it with your friends, or sending us a few bucks on buymeacoffee.com/MFA Writers. Recently, someone bought us several coffees, and Steve Grover signed up to be a monthly contributor, writing in part, "I really appreciate your podcast. It's so interesting to hear about other programs." Well, Steve, I really appreciate you and everyone else who listens and supports the podcast. It really means a lot. You can find MFA Writers on Instagram and Twitter, as well as mfawriters.com. We love to hear from listeners, so feel free to shoot us a direct message on one of those platforms or an email at mfawriterspodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a minute to rate or review the show, the best place to do that is on Apple Podcasts. Doing so will help boost our podcast as we try to boost these amazing writers. Also, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, you can apply at mfawriters.com. On that same website, you can also click the support button to support us financially, if it's within your means. Or you can do so by going directly to buymeacoffee.com/MFA Writers. Finally, as always, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to MFA Writers, the podcast where we talk to creative writing MFA students about their program, their process, and a piece they're working on. I'm your host, Jared McCormick. Today I'm with Spencer Robert Young. Spencer is a poet, essayist, and editor who recently earned an MFA in poetry from the University of Idaho. During the program, Spencer edited reviews and interviews for Fugue Literary Journal, and they currently judge chapbooks for the Cow Creek Chapbook Prize. A recipient of an Academy of American Poets Prize, their work has been published in a handful of literary journals and magazines. And their original chamber opera, Let's Blow Up a Gas Station, premiered with Seattle Opera in 2024. Today, Spencer has brought a couple of poems to read for us.
All right. First poem is titled "Circle Pit Proprioception," and it's for the underground concert venue that I spent a lot of time at as a kid in Omaha, Nebraska, the Sokol Underground. So, "Circle Pit Proprioception" for the Sokol Underground, 2012. Thick sludge of the then and there, your lungs in a bucket, and 2 inches of snow already on the ground. Still falling, harder now, each breath honeycombs out from behind your teeth as you step into the cold. You walk different in the winter, delicate, like the 2 green grass at the graveyard on South 60th, or a flickering lamppost for grounding a black sky. Behind each footstep, asphalt laced with de-icing salt, little blue crystals stuck in the loose rubber of your chucks. Out in the snow, each breath is an acupuncture needle in your sternum, and you notice your body on edge, each vein beating its own heart. Your shoulders wince, your arms flutter, and at the hip, blood pools purple, pastel against the bone. But inside, past the ticket boy and the bar with the walnut backsplash, and the smoke-yellowed mirror staring back at the boys slugging $2 drafts, the backup singer for the local thrashcore group grabs the mic and screams, "Oh, fucking hell yeah." And you are pulled again into that spiraling haze of cigarette ash and Jaeger bomb burps, tearing it up in the motherfucking pit. For now, forgive the world its violent expectations. You are a scene kid among scene kids, ballooning in a ritual of trust fall and kick pedal barrel drum on double time tempo. You are remembering what it is to be a body among bodies. Here, silhouettes pulse red underneath exit signs. Here, your sweat is not your sweat. Your blood is not your blood, and your bones, oh, your bones are more than yours alone. And here's one more poem. This one's titled "In the Life I Will Not Live." It's actually part of a series, all with the same title, in which I'm kind of conceptualizing a version of a life that I have dreamt that I'm pretty certain will not occur anytime in my life. So this is the first one that I wrote. In the life I will not live, the ocean is bitter and all I'll ever need. Muted greens and empty grays push against waves, breaching bleak rocks, the sting of salt on my tongue. Home is a stony coast in Maine or somewhere like it. Home is a word for a feeling I've never had. In the life I will not live, you are not here. Or you are here, but all your softness is wind-bitten, and you still believe in God because doubt remains a foreign luxury. Every afternoon, I walk the shore alone. I know my breath best when trade winds numb my throat. In the evenings, I work with my hands, chasing mugs of instant coffee with mouthfuls of roasted almonds. And at night, I dream of James Wright and his pitiful hammock. Every morning in this life I will not live, I've left you in the bed in the house for a job on a cargo ship headed for another ocean. I do not know God, so I do not know regret. I bring the sky with me.
Spencer, awesome. I loved those poems so much. Thanks for sharing them with us, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jared. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to chat with you. So, you write a lot about embodiment, a lot about punk music, queerness, climate change, and good books. And we can see a lot of these themes showing up in the poems that you read for us today. So, what do you think it is that draws you to these themes over and over again?
I think if I had to say like the reason why all of those things kind of swirl up in my poems is because I'm still relatively early in my poetry career. I've only been writing poems for probably close to 10 years seriously now, which I know is like a long time for some people, but the poets that I love and that I read, I've been writing poems for 5 times that. And so because I'm early in my time with poetry, I'm really interested in like, as many of us are, just like reflecting and rehashing and like revolving around our obsessions that we had when we were growing up, right? So I grew up as I said at the beginning of Circle Pip Reception, going to these punk shows. I grew up as a closeted queer kid in middle America in an evangelical Christian family, and so punk music was like the space where I was able to practice my queerness and to escape from the kind of like sometimes isolating the narratives that I was told, as a kid growing up in the spaces where I grew up. And so, yeah, punk music and queerness, I think, are intertwined, and that's why they come up in so many of my poems.
So, have you found for you that writing is a place where you can process kind of whatever it is that you're going through? Do you find the page is helpful in that respect?
I think I try to do that. I think that It's often something that's happening after. Like, it's not like I don't come to the page necessarily when I'm in the midst of whatever I'm struggling with. While I write about my queerness shows up in every poem, or like punk shows even show up in many of my poems. And while that's true now, like when I was struggling with the things that I write about in a lot of my poems, I wasn't going to the page to write about them. It feels like it's something that I don't know what the time period between like inciting incident and it getting in the poem happens, but there's definitely like this like kind of period in between where reflection and growth happens, and then I can look back on those experiences and those moments and be like, okay, I know what the poetic or artistic importance of that experience is, and I can put it into the poem.
So you said you've been writing poetry for like around 10 years. What was your creative outlet when you were a kid?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I did write. I think I've always kind of been a writer, but I think a trajectory for a lot of creative writers, not just poets, is that I was like, I'm gonna be a novelist. I'm gonna not necessarily that I thought I was gonna be like the next great American novelist or anything like that, but I did think like I was writing my novel in high school and was writing short stories when I was like as young as like 7 or 8 all the way through, and so, yeah, writing has always kind of been the outlet that I've found artistically, that worked for me most. I loved telling stories, and I think I still love telling stories. I just think I've, found different tools. Like, I'm not really interested in plot anymore, if that makes sense, but my poems are often narrative, or often setting scenes and then exploring those scenes with characters, and even if those characters are just like a past version of myself.
All right, so you mentioned that punk scene and how important that was to you, going to that punk club and like listening to music. I have to ask about how you got from that punk scene to writing this opera. And and I have to hear more about this opera, which is titled "Let's Blow Up a Gas Station," which I Googled and then immediately got an alert from Google saying that that it was flagged as a potential threat. So now I'm probably on a watch list. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
But I do want to know more about this opera. Let's Blow Up a Gas Station, the chamber opera. So tell us about how that project came to be, and what your history is with music and opera.
Yeah, so I have like almost zero history with opera. It was really kind of a spontaneous opportunity that was presented to me. I applied and then got accepted into this really great program that the Seattle Opera House was doing, called the Creation Lab. And basically they're trying to infuse like new energy, new voices, new artistic perspectives into the art form of opera. Because, as I think most people, listening to this podcast, or just young people in general, probably think like opera is like this is maybe a little intense, but it feels like it's dying, because the money that's in opera is all money that's coming from people who just want the classics. They don't want the new work. And so opera houses tend to just like, they'll have their one or two new pieces that they perform every season, but most of the time they're just, putting on new renditions or new versions of classic operas. And so Seattle Opera is not the only opera house that's doing this, but there's a number of programs out there that are interested in bringing in these new voices. And so, I was, as a poet, writing a lot about music, writing about punk music a lot. It felt like not a natural fit, but just like it felt like tangential to what I was working on. And I was just so curious to see like what would happen if I were able to write one. And then they paired me up with a composer who was also relatively fresh. ZW Buckley is his name. He's mostly in video games. He does music for video games and stuff like that. And so both of us kind of coming into the field of opera, into this new art form, with me writing the language, writing the libretto for the opera, and him, writing the music. It was exhilarating because it was so new and weird and different from anything I'd ever done or experienced before. And why let's blow up a gas station? I don't know. I think we both realized that we wanted to tell a political story, and we didn't want it to be like a polemic of like, oh, this is the right thing to do in this situation or the right answer to this political question. So we decided to write our opera around three disenfranchised climate activists who had decided that ecoterrorism was the next best step, and so they the entire opera, the entire piece takes place in the car ride on the way to the gas station, and so they're kind of it's meant to kind of be this simmering slow burn of a piece that just explores both the personalities and the histories of these three people, but also just their own ideologies and why they think this is a good idea, and then of course conflict, why they eventually start to fight about whether it is actually a good idea, and so we're able to explore both sides of this tense conversation surrounding what to do in response to extractivist anthropogenic climate change, and then we don't give an answer. I know that might be a little bit of a spoiler, but we don't tell the audience what is the right move, and I think that was important to us, that we just kind of like let it kind of simmer in that kind of uncertain, we've given the arguments, now make the choice yourself.
Well, it sounds really cool and an awesome opportunity. I'm glad you got to do it. All right, so let's go back to poetry, because like you said, you've been writing poetry for about 10 years, and I want to know what got you into poetry. And particularly, I want to know about a master class you attended with Jericho Brown that you said was one of your most formative moments as a poet. So what was that experience like, and what made it so influential to you?
So this was, way back. So I got my undergrad at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and Jericho was giving a reading at the university and did a masterclass with us. And I was like probably my first or second poetry class I'd ever taken. So we were just doing Q&A, and I remember like just starting to come to terms with my queerness, and like I was like, okay, well, here's this gay man that like writes about sex in his poems, like I want to ask him about sex. And so I was like, how do you write about sex in your poems? And in retrospect, I'm like, that's pretty weird for like, how does like a grown man who I don't know who he is, he doesn't know who I am, I'm this like 20-year-old kid, and how do you respond to that question?
Yeah, right.
But like Jericho was like so nice. He was like, well, first and foremost, what you need to do is you need to read 21 Love Poems by Adrienne Rich, because like that's going to tell you everything you need to know about how to write about sex in poems. But then he was also said that, when he's writing about sex or just writing about anything in general, he's always trying to balance this line between the perverse and the empathetic, and how those two things that oftentimes feel at odds are really kind of just, one step in either direction from one another. And I don't know, like something about that, saying that, it was just like, it was one of those euphoric moments where I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know how I'm going to use this in my poems, but like, I am so excited to do it, to try it out. It was one of the first times I'd kind of felt that, like, that fervor of energy to get to the page. And I think it was that coupled with something that Lisa Fay Cooley taught me in that class, and I assume still teaches everybody, which is like her central philosophy around poetry is that a good poem needs to have pattern and rupture. And the way she describes that, right, is like, like pattern, whether that be rhyme, whether that be form, whether that be some other, convention of of like sonic or formal, whatever it is, some sort of pattern that is followed, but any poem that just keeps that pattern and runs with it, and doesn't ever try to break it, is an uninspired or like a boring poem. And so the thing that makes poetry come alive is the feeling of rupture. And so it's that balance between pattern and rupture, which I kind of cast onto Jericho Brown's perverse versus empathetic. They felt like this duality that the whole point of the duality is to break the duality, was like so captivating to me. And then especially combining that with other experiences in my life, like being non-binary and having this duality that is intentionally broken in in my experience of gender. Um, that was like, it was that semester really that kind of just was like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
I am now going to be a poet. I want to do this thing because it lights me up.
So I want to hear about your process then. What does it look like when you're working on a poem and you're searching for this pattern and rupture?
Yeah. I think it changes with every single poem I write. I think for a long time, I was looking for pattern and rupture in the kind of images that I was, coming up with. So like, I remember for a long time I would sit there in the drafting phase, trying to find the most surprising metaphor that I could for a feeling or for a experience or something like that. I just wanted to throw two things that feel like they hit each other and or that they clash and they don't merge, and then like seeing what happens when I make them merge together. And I think I still do that to an extent sometimes, but right now where I feel the most energy for that pattern and rupture when I'm drafting a poem is working with sound or working with form, and finding the pattern, whether that be in a cascading rhyme or a legitimate rhyme scheme, and finding ways to intentionally break that pattern, or if I'm working in form, finding ways to subvert form, to rupture the expectation that the reader has come to understand. I guess I would say that's like maybe the ideal, the ideal writing process where I'm able to do that kind of like, I'm able to consciously think and focus on how I'm following patterns and how I'm choosing to rupture them. But most of the time, I write a draft and it fails and I don't know what I'm doing with it. And then I come back to it later and I'm like, oh, it's because I wasn't rupturing. Or it takes it takes a workshop, and I'll bring the poem to workshop and somebody's like, this is why this poem doesn't work. And they say it very nicely, but this is why this poem doesn't work. Um, and then I'm like, oh yeah. And then I have to have like a moment of rupture within my own creative process to like realize, oh, I'm just walking the walk. I need to start skipping. I need to start, tripping, maybe even.
Yeah. Well, you've told me that your process is quite a long one when working on poems, and that some of your favorite poems, the ones you're most proud of, you struggled with them for like months before they
Yeah.
ended up where they ended up. So, how do you stay motivated and confident when you're struggling through a poem for months?
I mean, this is gonna sound a little cheesy, but um, but I stay motivated by writing with others. Writing is not a solitary act. At least I don't think it should be. And when I get really beaten down by a poem, or even and this has happened from time to time, when I get beaten down by somebody's feedback of a poem, and it makes me feel very alienated or alone in my creative process. Um, that's when I turn to others, and the poems I am most proud of are the ones that have been touched by my friends. I don't know. Maybe an allegory is, I'm an editor. I've spent a lot of time editing. When people ask me like, why do you like editing? I say because when there's true collaboration that's happening between the writer and the editor, 10% of the piece becomes the editor's. Like when that thing gets published on whatever website it's getting published to, like a little bit of it belongs to the editor. And I say that while also knowing that, like, when I'm writing my own poems, yes, they are my poems, they are my ideas, they're coming from, somewhere within me. But when I share them with the people that I trust, I'm also asking and letting those people own a bit of the poem themselves. And those are the poems that become the most, that I value the most, are those poems that get that kind of relationship.
I mean, there's this myth that great work comes from a writer kind of isolating themselves in a
Yeah.
room, being depressed, being addicted, and just kind of like banging away on a typewriter alone, and alienated, as you said, and that's how good work is produced. And it's just not the truth. That's just not the way good work is produced for most people. And so I do think the MFA does, at the very least, give you an opportunity to get into an environment that counters that myth and see what can come from opening yourself up to other people and opening your work up to other people. And oftentimes, at least in my experience, it makes the work much better.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely it. And I do think there's something to be said for like spending time alone and but not the alienation, but the spending some time in, a room of one's own, right? To like be there and to, battle against a poem that you're struggling with. But that's just one part of the process. It's not the entire process. And there has to be a moment where there's a community waiting for the poem on the other side of that isolation, to really make it into something that I'm proud of. That's always really, really been the lesson that I've learned.
Well, let's talk about the MFA.
Sure.
You recently graduated from the University of Idaho, a 2-year fully funded program, which, best I can tell from the website, has tracks in fiction, poetry, and nonfiction. Is that correct?
Yeah, and this is actually really funny. It's a 3-year program, but the website does say 2 years. The department and the program's been trying to get that changed for a long time, and so they have their own like little independent website that they use. That's not a part of the university's main website.
A little lesson in university bureaucracy, that
Yeah.
even if you want to change your own program's website, it might not be that simple.
Exactly. Yes. Unfortunately, there's lots of emails and lots of people to get through to change a simple thing from a 2-year fully funded program to 3-year fully funded program. But
Okay. Hey, that's why we do the podcast. So now listeners know it is a 3-year fully funded program with tracks in fiction, poetry, and nonfiction. And actually,
yes.
before you attended the MFA, you actually attended a graduate program at Kansas State University and received an MA in creative writing and literature. So what made you want to pursue the MFA after finishing the MA?
Yeah, I think part of it was that I had always kind of had my sights set on the MFA, and I'll be honest, for people listening who have maybe been through this, the first time I applied to MFA programs, clean sweep, didn't get into a single one of them, and was really demoralized by that because I was like, oh, but I got my bachelor's in creative writing. I'm a good writer. Why am I not getting in these MFA programs? And so, had such a deep desire to study poetry at the graduate level. And so I had the opportunity that came to me to apply to the MA in Kansas State and work with Tracy Brimhall, who's Kansas Poet Laureate, just a phenomenal poet. And so I took the opportunity, and at Kansas State, lots of great things about that program. Also, I felt like I didn't have much time to spend with my poetry, because of other expectations, of teaching expectations, of just how the program worked, and my the inability to do independent study and independent writing. There wasn't a whole lot of it, and so I knew an MFA could give me that, or at least I knew that there was an MFA out there that would be able to give me that, and that was one of the main things that I was looking for when I was applying to MFAs the second time through. And then thankfully I got accepted into a handful and was able to make a choice, and Idaho was the choice I made.
So you've been in academia for a while now, having gone through that first graduate program and then straight into the second graduate program. That's a different experience than most people have entering an MFA program. So I'm curious about that, because you told me that a lot of your classmates at Idaho had taken some time away from academia before they came back to the MFA. So what do you think are the pros and cons of your path versus taking time off before going to the MFA?
Yeah, totally. I think there are lots of pros, right? In the sense that, because I already had 2 years of grad school under my belt, like I knew what the rigor looked and felt like. I taught undergraduate English courses while I was in the program here, and I'd done that at Kansas State too, and so I knew what it was like to teach and to grade while also taking my own classes and trying to carve out time to focus on my own work, and not just my own work as a artist, but like also my life as like a person outside of my poems and outside of teaching and being in a academic setting. It's really hard, and as someone on the other side of it, who's finally experiencing like life without being in grad classes for the first time in 5 years, is like, whoa, this is what free time feels like. Amazing. This is great. But yeah, so in that sense, like I had a keener understanding of what the next 3 years would look like at the outset. Whereas I think, it took my cohort, that's that first semester to really kind of figure it out. And so I think because of that, I was able to take advantage of a few extra things. I had the opportunity to teach an honors course, and I had the opportunity to teach a women, gender, and sexuality studies course. I did things like the opera and other creative opportunities presented at some conferences. I did these extra things because I felt like I could add on those additional things that if I was just starting out grad school at my first year here, probably would have been too overwhelmed really to deal with those things. And so those are all the pros, right? But I do think that I think there's something to be said for taking time away between undergrad and grad school. I didn't really do that. I had like 8 months off between my graduating from my undergrad and starting that MA, and I wish I had taken more time in retrospect, because a lot of my cohort have these other lives that they've been able to live, and this experience that they've gained, that as somebody who jumped on the academic train and rode it all the way through 4 degrees, I don't think I've been able to have the same diversity of experience as other folks in my program have. Not to say that I am regretful necessarily, or think I did it wrong. I don't think that there's necessarily like a wrong or a right way to do this. But it's just something to consider. If you are graduating from an undergrad and think that the next move is grad school, stop and think about it for a second. Maybe it makes sense to even just a gap year, just to like reconceptualize what writing looks like for you, what being a creative writer looks like for you outside of the classroom, because I didn't really get to think that or let myself think that until I was nearing the graduation of this program and being like, okay, well, now, I knew PhDs weren't in the cards for me right now. And so I was kind of like, well, I got to figure out what it means to be a writer outside of the workshop classroom.
And the cool thing about MFAs is there's such a diversity of ages and backgrounds that if you take a year or two off before you go back, or even 5 or 10 years, you're likely to still very much fit in with the people that you
Totally.
meet in the program, because people are coming from all kinds of different backgrounds. So when you were applying to programs and later accepting this spot in the MFA, what was it that drew you to the University of Idaho?
Yeah. So the great one of the best things is that I had the opportunity to visit beforehand, which I know is not something that everybody gets the opportunity to do. But it was something that really helped me see that Idaho was the place I wanted to be. Just like the focus on community and mentorship over in the worst case, like a degree mill, where it's just kind of like we're just churning people out with their MFAs, or even like a space where the rigor of like, the publication pedigree is much higher, where the goal is to, become the next big poet or become the next big fiction writer. Nobody here, as far as I can tell, really has that aspiration. We just all really love getting to the page and investing in it. And of course, that of course means like we all want to publish our book, and we all want to have the job that allows us to do that. Make that kind of life possible. But there was just this deep like camaraderie of the program that immediately stood out to me that I loved. And I think another big part of it was just, from a personal perspective of wanting to leave the Midwest and going to North Idaho in a town that I had never heard of and most people had never heard of. And yet there still being like this really rich, interesting, artistic community up here. It was just so captivating to me.
So what's it like living in Moscow, Idaho?
Yeah. What's it like? I think there's lots of great things about this town. There's also lots of problems. I think some of the great things, I mean, it's, North Idaho is very hilly. I wouldn't necessarily quite call it mountainous, but we do have a mountain, technically, Moscow Mountain. It's a large hill for some people, but for me, coming from Kansas, immediately before this, I was like, "That's a mountain. That's cool. I only have to drive 10 minutes to get to a mountain." So yeah, location was great. It was great for me. It's a really alien landscape up here. We're in the region called the Palouse, which is like these like really weird rolling green hills, wheat fields mostly, and canola. That just get like they look super weird and like flowy in the summer, and then in the winter they get like like a little frozen over, and it's like very mystical almost. But then you're in an hour in any direction, and you're in some really really cool mountains to the north and to the east, and to the south is Snake River, and then there's the high desert of Washington to the west. So it's just really pretty place to be. And there's lots of great little restaurants and breweries around town. Moscow's only I think 25,000 people before students, before you count students at the university. So, but it does feel like it's got its own identity outside of the university, and lots of really cool arts organizations, really cool independent theater, the Kenworthy, and cool Moscow Contemporary, really cool art nonprofit, and surprisingly like a pretty solid queer community for small town Idaho, of all places. It's rural queers are the future, and I think Moscow is a place where you see that solidarity really present. There's a really cool LGBTQ nonprofit called Inland Oasis that does amazing work here. They put on drag shows in North Idaho, like crazy.
That's great.
Yeah. But then there's also some problems with this town. It's not racially diverse. So for people of color who are listening, I mean, as a white person, I can't speak to that, but I can say that some of my friends who are people of color, have felt alienated because of that. And in addition to that, there's some like pretty scary stuff happening with the church here in town. A lot of intimidating alt-right evangelical Christian propaganda stuff, and they have a lot of economic sway in town too. And so they aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And while there's a pretty invested and solid community response to what they do, so like even though they try to put somebody on the city council every election, they always lose, but they're still here. And so that's always one of those kind of like big, huge asterisks that I say when anybody asks about this program is like, there's so much to love about Moscow. There's so much to love about this program and just the experience of living here. But there are other aspects that make it so people of certain demographics are just going to be less safe here. And yeah, that fucking sucks. But like, I also don't want to like try and spin and say something that's not true.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's important to just be honest and put it out there and let people, make those decisions. It's cool that there's a pretty big queer community there, though. So you have that solidarity, and you have like community spaces that you can turn to where you can feel safe if you don't feel safe in other places in town.
Yeah, and there is. It's wild. It's awesome. It's really cool to see.
Okay, so earlier we mentioned that the program is fully funded on the website. The website that I have heard is not very well updated. It says all students admitted to the MFA program are fully funded through teaching assistantships. That's pretty much all it says. So I'm hoping to fill in some blanks. What is the teaching like in the program? What's the workload? What types of classes do you teach? What's the stipend? All of those things would be good to know for listeners.
Totally. Yeah. So it's a 2-2. Teach 2 classes a semester, and that's a lot. Its class size is I think 22 students per class. So yeah, you're teaching 40 to 44 students a semester, and you're teaching either an introductory English course. It's English 1101, kind of like comparable to Comp 101, or English 1102, so Comp 2. And there's a dedicated team of people that run the first year writing program that provide lots of support. And there's not a whole lot of hand holding, but there's also not very much policing or, like a lot. There's not a whole lot of oversight of what you're doing in the classroom. And so, I always felt that I had the freedom to teach the class in the way that made the most sense to me, which I really enjoyed. And as somebody with experience of other programs, is not always the case. So, stipend, it is fully funded. There's like a few fees that aren't covered in stipend, but it's nothing more than maybe like a few $100s. And the stipend is around, I want to say 16,000. It kind of fluctuates, of course, based on the funding that the program can get. But when I first started, it was around 15, and then now it's up to around 16. And that is doable in Moscow. You can live off of that, but it's still, it's not a whole lot of money, and it's a little tight. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then there are, though, some course release options for students later in the program. So for third years, one student gets to be the editor-in-chief of Fugue Journal, and they get a course release. So they only teach one class a semester. And then in the second or third year, you can also apply to work as a graduate writing consultant in the Writing Center, and that is a full course release. So you work in the Writing Center for 20 hours a week instead of teaching. And I had the opportunity to do that my third year, and it was great, really wonderful experience. So there's some options for course releases and whatnot, but the majority of people teach 2 sections of comp, or writing and rhetoric, as it's called here, every semester for their 3 years.
And I know that you weren't the editor-in-chief of Fugue, but you did get to work as an editor of reviews and interviews, I believe. So what was that experience like? And is that something you would recommend people to take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. So fun. I think I spent a lot of time as an editor, like as an editor of poetry or prose genres, before coming to Idaho. And when I got here, just because of how things kind of worked out, the only editor position that was available when I reached out to be a part of the team was the interviews and reviews, and I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. Like, I don't know if I really want to do that, but I was like, okay, I'll do it, just to try it out, and I fell in love with it. Like, I love reviews and interviews; it's so fun, and just like getting to break the mold of what is expected out of the review. The editor in chief of our first year and I kind of started this like a hybrid genre that we call a conditional, which is kind of like a cross between a personal essay and a review that we published on Fugue's website, and was written by other members of the editorial team. And it's just one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had as an editor, but also just as like a person in a writing community. Being able to invest and help people express their excitement for the things that wowed them, that they've read, is so rewarding. And yeah, Fugue is great, and it's entirely student run. Mike McGriff, one of the poets here, is kind of like the faculty advisor, but he intentionally kind of keeps his hands off things and really just kind of works with like the money, and helps the editor in chief with like formatting things in the background. So I had a lot of freedom to kind of run the genre of reviews and interviews the way that I wanted to, and nothing but praise for the journal here.
Yeah, and I say it a lot on this program, but I had the chance to work on a lit mag when I was in my MFA, and it was a great experience. Highly recommend it to anyone listening. If you get the chance to work really in any capacity, you're going to learn so much about the industry and about your own work. So highly recommend it. All right. Well, the last question I want to ask is, what is one way in which the MFA experience has been different, for better or for worse, from your expectations when applying?
I guess what I would say is that back when I was applying, I thought that the MFA would be this experience that I would gain like both the critical and professional skills to like be a writer in the world, and to like have the ability to just like go out and like, yeah, I can get the job and I can do the writing thing. That is not what I gained here. And I don't think that's any fault of the program. I think it's just really hard out there right now. But what I did take away and what I did learn is how to create a sustainable writing practice. And I know like a lot graduating, speaking with some of my friends here in the program, some of them are feeling kind of defeated because they're like, well, what did I gain out of spending these 3 years here? Because they're struggling to find jobs, or they're kind of in this weird like in between space between graduating from the MFA and doing the next thing in their lives. And so some people kind of feel this stagnation. And one of my friends reminded me, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, that's like, I spent 3 years here. I have so many poems. I have so many tools to take advantage of. I'm never going to run out of ways to return to the page, and that's something that I definitely did not have when I moved here 3 years ago. And even though it's not tangible, it's something that is like so valuable to my life after this. as a creative thinker and as a writer, in whatever direction it takes me.
Well, it's been great getting to know you. I really appreciate you stopping by. And hey, enjoy that time outside of academia, why don't you?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'll see how it goes.